Hi, I'm Jason Harrelson, and today we are going to be discussing the 3 mistakes to avoid when choosing a mouthpiece. And really what we mean by that is the 3 mistakes you may have already made. You could have made them 20 or 30 years ago. Maybe you're making them right now because you're choosing a new mouthpiece. But we want to talk about how and why these mistakes exist and how to avoid them. So the first thing I should really say is that I have experience fitting thousands of people with mouthpiece setups, and I've been doing that for about 20 years. When I started, I learned a lot about mouthpieces, and eventually that helped me become a better player because I found what worked for me. But I learned most of this from my clients because they had problems I never encountered, and I'm talking tons of different things that I never even dreamed could be true. Everything from car accidents to getting dentures, to changing their embouchure, to having damage from other things like maybe too much pressure over the years, or having loose teeth, or less air support, all kinds of things. So I learned a lot about fitting people for mouthpieces, what works and what doesn't, and I broke it down scientifically so we could really reproduce this, train other people, and then help you fit yourself for a mouthpiece. So whether you're deciding on buying a new mouthpiece or not, whether you'd ever consider buying one from Harrelson Trumpets or not, it doesn't really matter. All of this is going to apply to you. You can go to the store, check out Schilke and Bach and Yamaha mouthpieces, and compare them to the latest Monette or whatever it might be, and you can use all these principles to find the best mouthpiece for you. So I'm going to show you this one right here, which is a Legends. This is the Legends S PC. Okay, so we have a lot of Legends mouthpieces here because we scan all the different mouthpieces from different brands. But this one is different than a standard Bach or Yamaha or Schilke or even Monette. So we're going to talk a little bit about this. And the first thing you need to avoid is making a mistake in choosing the rim diameter and shape. So let's write that down. The first thing is the rim diameter and shape. Now, this really is important because there are parts of your dental structure and your approach to playing that may determine a completely different rim diameter or a shape. And what I mean by shape is the actual roundness of the mouthpiece. So let's write that up here. We'll just kind of show it right here. Mouthpieces can be round on the top, okay? And this is the bowl and this is the throat and that's the back bore, okay? So this roundness right here may fit some players and it may not. There are times when that round shape could really work for you. Sometimes you need more of a flat shape on the inside, and sometimes you need more of a flat shape on the outside, and sometimes you need flat on the inside and the outside. In other times, you may actually need the round point to be closer to the inside or the outside. And we're going to talk about some of those. We go into depth in each piece of the rim in a different video, but this is more of an overview. The most important reason that this can vary from player to player is because of your high points. If you have not heard of a high point, then this is something to consider right away. Your high point will determine the diameter of your mouthpiece. So high point is directly tied to the diameter. Now, the shape of your lip or of your teeth and how flat they are could really determine the shape of your mouthpiece, okay? So that's the other component. This is tied to diameter, and then your dental structure, these are actually related. We're gonna say dental shape is related to the shape of the mouthpiece. The reason that's true is because if your teeth are crooked like mine, then you have a distinct high point somewhere. Now I have one over here, and I have one right in the middle on my 2 front teeth. I kind of got lucky because when my wisdom teeth came in, they crushed my teeth together a little bit. I never had braces. I never had my wisdom teeth removed. My upper wisdom teeth really didn't come in all the way. They shifted things a little. So I have a high point right on the left center tooth. And that means that that high point is a great place for me to pivot the mouthpiece. It's up a little bit higher, so I tend to play on a larger diameter rim. If it were lower, my diameter may be a smaller rim. A lot of teachers will say, well, you choose your rim size based on the size of your lips. There is some truth to that, but there's also a huge fallacy, because most teachers are just looking at people's lips and saying you need this size, and it can be very much the wrong size. A lot of times people are playing on a diameter that's far too large for them. Some of you are playing on one that's too small. And the dental structure, the high point, all those things are factors. So we're gonna breeze through this, hit the other two major factors, but I wanna review on this and extrapolate a little bit. If you have really flat teeth, then chances are you could benefit from a flat rim, because a sharp rim could actually push evenly into your teeth and cut off the blood supply, all right? So a flat rim might be better for someone who has flat teeth. That way you have even pressure, your teeth and your rim, squeezing your lips in between. Now if you have a high point, like I do, then my high point on my teeth could pivot right on this part here. So let me, let's just say my high point is a little bit like that. When the rim touches that part of the tooth with a round rim, now I'm minimizing the amount of pressure on my lips. I can cut off the blood supply, but because that high point doesn't go the full length of the mouthpiece, it doesn't follow the diameter, it's just in one spot, I'm only cutting off the blood in one tiny spot, and I'm pivoting on that spot. So when I'm playing, I'm pivoting on that spot. And this is something I found subconsciously a long time ago, and most players do find subconsciously the place that feels best. But if you're playing on the wrong rim diameter, you're gonna find a spot that doesn't work for you best, because it's just what can work with that diameter. So you do need to test different diameters and play, do some play testing and see what works best, and then get used to that. So rim shape, hugely important. If you happen to have a nice high point somewhere on the upper dental structure, then you are most likely going to have more range and more endurance, and perhaps a better tone overall. If you have had braces or dentures that are perfectly flat, you most likely will struggle more than the people with high points. And there are physical reasons this happens. You can watch the other video where I explain that in detail. All right, so rim diameter and shape are related to your high point. If you don't have one, you probably need some flat. And your dental shape, same exact thing. If your dental structure is completely perfect, then there is some roundness to it, and you still can have somewhat of a high point, but a flat rim will really help you minimize the pressure. So what is number two? Any guesses? What is the second thing we really care about? And before I go any further, I should also just show you a couple different mouthpieces. These are a Legends and a Monette. And you can see the shape is different. So this one's more round, this one's more flat. And I have other mouthpieces here as well. Like I said, we've scanned hundreds, if not over 1,000 mouthpieces, different sizes and varieties. So we know every cross-section of all these mouthpieces. And working with clients and seeing what works for them in terms of where their high point is or what kind of dental structure they have, we really have a pretty comprehensive way of finding what works for you. If you've played my 5mm modular mouthpiece system and you couldn't find the right fit, that means you either didn't try the right rim size, or you tried it either with bias or just not long enough. But I'll tell you this, our 5mm modular mouthpiece comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. And the truth is, if in 2 months it didn't work for you, tell me and we'll still work with you and find a solution. My goal is for you to play it and love it, and for it to be an improvement. I don't care to sell you things you don't use. So what we found is we have about a 3.4% return rate on 5mm modular mouthpieces. And that's important to discuss right now, because that means 3.4% of our clients that I worked with, or Christine or Joe or one of us worked with individually, somehow or another did not find the right fit. The majority of those said that they had some kind of problem with the way the mouthpiece felt on their lips. That means they either didn't try the right diameter or the right shape, or both. Now, I've done a lot of interviews with people who return mouthpieces to understand how and why that happens. And the majority of the people that return mouthpieces told me this: you didn't have the right diameter or shape for me. Which has me wondering, because we actually make pretty much every diameter and shape. And what we've concluded is that most people have a bias going into this whole system of trying other mouthpieces where you may believe you have the best mouthpiece in your hand and you can't get to another one, mostly because you read charts. And if you're reading mouthpiece charts, then you're going to have a lot of struggles in finding a compatible mouthpiece in a different brand, and not just in Harrelson, but in any brand. And I'm going to explain that real quick. So what happens here is when you design a mouthpiece as a mouthpiece maker, I'm going to take this section of the cup and I'm going to make it larger. So let's do that right here. We're going to go like this, and this is the inside of the cup, okay? So when we come up with a diameter, actually I'm going to draw the other half of it over here. When we come up with a diameter, then the diameter could be somewhere between here and here, like this. Does that make sense? So literally we're measuring the diameter of the cup. However, depending on the shape of the mouthpiece, the diameter might be somewhere else. And this happens for a couple reasons. One is because a lot of machines are CNC, which means computer numerical control. That means that we're using software to type in a diameter, and then we're also giving it radius values. So this could actually be 6 or 8 or 12 different radius values. For some makers, it's only 1 or 2. And so the radius here could be, say, 0.030. What that really means is that it's going to take 30 thousandths of an inch and make that the radius. Now the question is, where is the end of that radius and where does the diameter start? It may start right here instead of right here. And if it started here, the diameter overall is going to be bigger. So if it started up here, your diameter might be 650. If it started down here, it might be 630. Okay? Here's the problem. If you go looking at charts and you try to determine which mouthpiece sizes are identical to each other, you are most likely going to have problems. And the reason that's true is because mouthpiece makers, many of which I know and I'm friends with, we don't have a standard. We don't have any kind of measurement standards that tell us we need to all measure from the same point. So Warburton, Terry might be measuring right here, and Dave Monette might be measuring right here, and Gary Radke might be measuring up here, and I might measure somewhere else. And I'll tell you where I measure. I go down 120 thousandths of an inch from the rim top. So from here to 120 is my diameter. The reason mine is there is because my mouthpieces are modular. So I really have no choice but to keep it consistent. So our system is very consistent because we really have no choice. So I just took the rim, cup, and throat out of my body of my mouthpiece, and I'm going to show you how this works. I'm going to just get this up close. If you look closely, you can see there are two little seams. One's for the cup and one's for the throat. Well, I'm going to pull that throat out, and then we're just going to look at these two. So I have those two parts. I have to keep the dimensions from the top of the rim to the bottom of the rim exactly the same every time. It's always 120 thousandths of an inch. So we measure our rims right there. But what happens if I reproduce somebody else's mouthpiece and the shape of the rim actually looks more like this? Okay? And when it comes down to the cup, it does that. Where is the inside diameter of this rim? Well, I don't know, because I didn't program the machine that made it the first time. That could have been Curry or Bach or Yamaha, whoever it was. I have no idea where they measured it, and they came up with a value on a chart. Then Terry Warburton says, well, I want to make one similar to that. And he does all his stuff to do it, but he wants his rim shape to be different, a couple little different, but he wants to say the diameter is similar. Well, it might be similar, or it might not, because it really depends on how wide this radius is. If we make this radius tighter, the rim and the cup are going to feel like a smaller diameter. So this would feel smaller, this would feel larger. This could be a 600, and this could be a 650. Depending on your preferences and how the rim shape changes, a 650 and a 600 could actually be the same diameter. And that's why it's really important not to spend a lot of time looking at charts, because charts are everybody's guess on how to measure this. The truth is, we can't truly give you a cross-reference chart if the rim shape is not exactly the same, or if the cup shape is not the same. The more shallow your cup, the more this problem exists. So those are things you never hear about or read about on charts or really on the internet, and it's something we specialize in because we see it every day. This rim shape has a very tight inner radius. So that's the rim by itself. The radius on the inside is pretty tight. So it's going to be more like this one and less like that one. But we make the exact same diameter rim with all the shapes, meaning our numbers on the chart would be the same, but we make one that feels much bigger, one that feels not quite as big, and even something that feels smaller. And the rim diameter on our chart is exactly the same. And that's true of any manufacturer that makes different shapes of rims or cups and keeps the same diameter. If you were to measure 3 different Warburtons that had 3 different cup shapes, somewhere in that mouthpiece, the sizes do change in diameter, and it could feel like a smaller or larger rim to you. So, back to rim diameter and shape. In a huge nutshell, that's really what you have to be concerned about. Okay, so, any questions on that before we move on? I'm going to erase this and move on. Of course, you guys can't answer questions because it's not a live video, but I do a lot of live videos and clinics, and we also do them live right here in the Harrelson Trumpet Shop. So if you do visit Denver, you may want to look at our calendar and visit when we have a special session on mouthpiece design and choosing the correct mouthpiece. We also do those on trumpets and on really the physical aspects of performing, range, endurance, embouchure, tone quality, all those things. Okay, so let's move on to the number 2 most common really mistake that people make when they are choosing a mouthpiece, or maybe one that you never considered before you started playing the mouthpiece you're on now. And that would be something you've probably never heard of again. Throat entrance. The throat entrance is extremely important when it comes to the feeling of resistance and how much buzz or sizzle or warmth you get in your tone. Here at Harrelson, we make many different throat entrances. Almost all other manufacturers only make 1 or 2. And the interesting thing is, a lot of people love a certain brand of a mouthpiece for a certain type of playing. Then they may move to a different brand to get a different type of playing. And what I mean by that is a lot of players might go to a Schilke 14A 4A or some special version of a Monette to play lead. And then they may go to a completely different mouthpiece to play classical or jazz, whether it's jazz combo or in a jazz big band. And the reason a lot of times that's true is because of the throat entrance. They're actually switching brands and rim shapes and everything just to get a different sound that really isn't necessary, because you could stay on the same rim all the time and just change the throat entrance only and leave everything else the same. So most of our clients are doing that. They're changing the throat just for a different genre of music. If you want a lot of sizzle, you want a throat entrance that looks very different. So I'm going to draw for you the standard Harrelson throat entrance, which looks like this. Looks like a nice vase. And I have one sitting here. This is our throat. And you can see it's very much this shape. The idea here is that the air goes into a much larger volume area and then compresses very gently. That will give you a really warm, full, darker tone. You still get the vibrancy and the color, but you don't get a lot of sizzle and you don't feel a lot of resistance. So most times our customers say, wow, your mouthpiece feels a lot more open. Now, everyone may have a different interpretation of a different brand, but most people that play Monette say the same thing. Monette's throat entrance isn't as big as ours on their standard mouthpieces, but that's often what they hear when they play Monette as well. It sounds bigger, it sounds warmer, more core to the sounds, and sometimes people really don't want that. So we make other throat shapes, and our most extreme throat shape looks like this. See the difference? So now we have hardly any volume, and the air is literally going to be coming this direction, right? And when it hits all of this, it's going to bounce back. It's going to push back on the airstream, so you feel back pressure. And that's a great way to create some distortion and really create a hard front end attack that makes it easier and brighter in the upper register. So the green version definitely is better for commercial and lead players or situations, whether you play that all the time or you switch genres. And then the pink one is going to be better for really producing a big warm tone. How many of you have ever thought about throat entrance as a variable in your mouthpiece setup? I'm going to pull out these two mouthpieces again. And the Monette is, I just grabbed this out of our collection. So this one is a B6S1 Prana, okay? And then the other one, like I said, was the Legends PC. So I'll pull them up next to each other. You can see those? All right, the throat entrances are different. So the Monette is much more like the pink example up there, and the Legends is much tighter. You can also see the cup is also smaller. There's other variables, but we're just looking at the throat. The Legends is more of a screamer mouthpiece. This is more of a bigger, warmer mouthpiece. It does work for all around playing. You could play lead on it, but this one's going to give you that pushback and that kind of angst in your sound right away, and you're not really going to get that with the Monette. So that's all about throat entrance. Now, like I said, most manufacturers only have 1 or 2 throat entrances. I'm not really sure why that's true with so many manufacturers, but with Bach and Yamaha and older manufacturers, it's really most likely because the designer, whoever that may have been, whether it was Vincent Bach or somebody else, or Schilke, those guys were probably looking for the happy medium that worked everywhere. Now Schilke does have smaller cup sizes that are specifically designed for lead playing, and some of their throat entrances do start to become more shallow. But the truth is, most Schilke mouthpieces, the entrance is already pretty shallow. Same with Yamaha, because they're somewhat a copy of the Schilkes. So a lot of people really like maybe the sound of a Bach, but they may not like the feel on their lips because the rim diameter and shape is different. And Bach rims tend to be very round, and Schilke rims tend to be more flat. So you can see there's a bias in the different brands that maybe nobody's ever talked about before, but a lot of times Bach mouthpieces only work for high point players or people who learn to play with less pressure, mouthpiece pressure, and they may work really well for a nice big tone. Whereas Yamaha and Schilke have a much flatter rim. They work better for people that usually have had braces or just naturally didn't have a high point and had more of a perfect dental structure. However, a lot of times they can't get the big robust tone because of the throat entrance. So they have to go to a bigger and bigger diameter to get that. And when they go to that bigger diameter, then they may have gone too big to get the sound they want, all because they wanted the sound and the rim shape. And that's where there's this huge dilemma in brands. And where I think Monette has fit in for a long period of time is he's had more flat rims, so they work with more people, maybe not as flat as they could be, but a semi-flat rim, so it can be a hybrid between the round and the flat. At the same time, he's had these much bigger throat entrances. So when you hear people say, oh, I love Monette, I can't play anything else, I believe it's because that's kind of the hybrid between the two. And other people say, I could never play Monette, it doesn't work for me. A lot of times that's because they either need something more flat, more round, or they just don't like that much warmth and core to the sound. All these variables are adjustable in our system. I'm not really going to talk about our system today. You can watch videos on the 5mm modular mouthpiece if you want to. But in reality, we make 5 basic shapes of entrances that can give you all the genres you would need, and they work for all players. All right, so number 3. What is the third really big mistake that people make when they are playing or choosing a mouthpiece? Or even, when I say choosing a mouthpiece, if you didn't choose another mouthpiece, or you've been playing on the same one for many years, and you never thought I should change, that's the same as choosing a mouthpiece, because you're choosing the one that's just on your face. it means that you're choosing not to try any others, which could be a huge mistake. And it could be that a Legends mouthpiece is perfect for you, or a Monette. Or maybe if you've never played Schilke and you only play Bach, maybe you should go try Schilke or Yamaha, because there could be something we talked about that works better for you. All right, so number 3. This one may not surprise some of you, but that last part is backbore length. Okay, backbore length. Let me erase this and start over. Have you ever thought about backbore length? What does that mean? Well, I'm going to grab all 3 of these mouthpieces again. There's the Harrelson there too. Get them all up on camera. So we have 3 backbores here. Now, you can't really tell the length of the backbore unless you measure it from the throat. So the throat would be somewhere down here. It's the smallest part. From there to the end of the backbore technically could be your backbore length. Or you can use an equation to figure out exactly what it is. But these are all different. So you can see the Harrelson and Monette are pretty much the same length, and that Legends is longer. Overall, the mouthpiece is longer. The truth is, it's mostly the backbore. Okay? We really would want to measure also from here to the lead pipe. So how much mouthpiece gap you have. So imagine this is your lead pipe. When it's in the receiver, there can be some space there. Let me get that up close. So there could be space between them. All right, and depending on how much space you have, you're going to have a different experience entirely. I'm going to draw this on the board. So backbore length really can be, we'll draw it this way. Let's give you your mouthpiece, cup, throat, then the backbore does that, okay? And it looks something like that. All right, so that's a mouthpiece. This backbore length really would go from the smallest part of the throat, so let's draw that. And the smallest part, let's say, is right here. So we're measuring from there all the way down to here. That's your backbore length. In reality, there are 2 parts to the backbore length. The first is really how long it is, and that taper. The longer the taper, the more you may have intonation tendencies. So I should say the more extreme the length. So if it's really long or really short, you're going to have intonation tendencies. In general, if you have a backbore that is exactly the same amount of volume, but it changes length, then you're most likely going to experience going higher or lower in pitch in the extremes of the mouthpiece or on the trumpet. So finding the correct length that matches the air volume and length of your instrument is key to getting what Monette calls a constant pitch center. He kind of coined that term. The truth is, in brass acoustics, pretty much everyone has been looking for the perfect match between the mouthpiece, the oral cavity in your mouth, and the lead pipe and the length of the instrument and the bell flare. All those things have to match in terms of impedance. If they do, then every note will be as close to in tune as is physically possible. So as you go higher and higher and higher, they will still be in tune. There are a lot of variables, because when you play higher, the oral cavity, the space inside your mouth, is getting smaller for almost everyone. So if this is the top of your mouth and this is your tongue can raise up as you play higher. And that's a natural thing that we do to compress the air, but also we're adjusting intonation by making the air volume less as we go higher. If you have a high rate of change as you go higher, then you could tend to play sharp in the upper register. And likewise, if you didn't raise your tongue and your mouth, close it up as much, you might even play flat in the upper register, which is less common. Some people play sharp in the lower register because they don't bring the tongue down low enough when they play low. So this really has to adjust as you go higher. But if your mouthpiece backbore is too long, then you could experience all these exact same issues. So having a mouthpiece backbore that's too long could create a situation where as you play higher, you begin to go sharp or flat, okay? And I can't tell you in general terms what's going to happen because it depends on the volume in the backbore. That's another factor. But the thing is, adjusting the length can adjust your tendency to go high on the pitch, okay? So, and the same thing going low, you may be high on the pitch when you go really low. So you want to be able to play in tune on all your octaves on any note. Backbore length will affect that. Longer mouthpieces tend not to play in tune. That's because of physics. The standard mouthpiece that we all use, like a Bach or a Yamaha, is pitched to the key of A. And the issue is that that's too low, and that's because trumpets were originally pitched lower like that. The first Bach trumpet I ever played that was an old horn was serial number 25, and that had an A to B flat trigger or a rotary tube inside the tuning slide. That was a really cool horn. It was amazing to play it. I got to use it for a few weeks, measured it. That had to be like 20 years ago now, maybe like 18 years ago, whatever it was. And that horn, the mouthpiece in A played perfectly in tune. In B flat, I always had problems. And that constant pitch center that you hear about, that's a real thing. So Monat did figure it out. He wasn't the first to figure it out. From what I understand about all my research, the Germans figured that out 100 years ago. Olds picked up on it, and their mouthpieces, interestingly enough, look very similar. The old ones look like Monat mouthpieces, his first generation. But that backbore length is really important. The overall mouthpiece length, you could call it that as well, but it really is in the backbore. All right, so I spent a lot of time on that, but we have one more piece to talk about. So you really have the length, but the other piece of the backbore is the gap setting, okay? Now, of those 3.4% of my customers that returned their 5mm modular mouthpieces under our guarantee, there was about 30% of them that had this issue. And no matter what I did to try to help them, they weren't even interested in listening to the conversation because they believed that the mouthpiece just wouldn't work for them, instead of giving me the opportunity to change the gap setting. And what that's all about is when you have a receiver, and let's just draw a receiver over here. Okay, so a receiver is a taper, right? And the mouthpiece goes in here. So this is your mouthpiece going that way, and this is your receiver. When you put your receiver in, these two tapers match. Wherever it stops, it will create a stopping point, and we can measure that from where it meets the lead pipe. That little space is the gap. And that gap on Harrelson instruments is completely adjustable because we created a system. You can change it. You can also change the venturi, all these things. But in reality, if you have a regular mouthpiece and a regular trumpet, and you put those together, I'll grab one. So here's a standard trumpet and mouthpiece. I put it in. It's going to go on a specific distance. If I mark the end of that receiver and I measure this compared to the next mouthpiece, which happens to be the Monat, then I'm going to get two different lengths. I don't know what they are right now, but my whole point is that gap setting, how much space is actually between the lead pipe and the end of your backbore, is crucial in setting up your horn to play the way you want it to. So if you're playing on a solid receiver and a solid mouthpiece, first off, you're doing yourself a disfavor because you could play on 1800s technology all day long, but you're never going to be able to adjust this unless you buy other backbores that are different lengths or different tapers. And very few manufacturers offer that. On the Harrelson 5mm, we do offer all the variations so you can change the gap if you want. But it's easier to then do that if you have an adjustable gap receiver. So the issue, again and again, that we find is that people did not explore different gap settings. So if they had a mouthpiece that they put in there for the last 20 years and it gave them 100 thousandths of gap, they're going to feel a certain amount of hard slotting as they go higher. And if the new mouthpiece only gives them 20 thousandths of gap, it's going to be slippery. They're going to be like, hey, I can't quite lock into the notes. It's not that they can't, it's just that they're used to the other mouthpiece that forced that impedance change and forced them to lock in on notes that probably weren't perfectly in tune. So less gap is actually better, but you have to be a better player to use it. And most people can't get there just by saying, I'm going to go from 100 to 0. Instead, you have to make gradual changes and really learn to adjust over time. So being able to change your backbore length to change the gap is really important, and I can't stress that enough. Because if you can't do that, then you can have a mouthpiece that has the perfect diameter, the perfect shape, it fits your high point and your dental shape. You've got the perfect throat entrance that just suits your type of playing and resistance and feel. We didn't talk about the throat diameter, but that fits too. And everything sounds and feels perfect, but that gap is wrong. Then you could have the perfect mouthpiece that now locks in too hard or doesn't lock in enough, and you could put it on the shelf and never play it again. And that is why it's so important to understand all the different aspects of the mouthpiece and also find a way to test all of them. I actually have a fourth really tip. The fourth mistake that people make, which could really be considered number one, but the fourth one that I see again and again is this. Most people, when choosing a mouthpiece, took advice from someone who didn't know all of this. And that can be very, very detrimental to your playing. The reason I say that is because if the person who gave you a recommendation did not address all of these issues, and there are more, but these are the basic important ones, then they could have said, I think you should play on a 1.5 C because you've got thick lips. And I've heard so many great teachers and players tell their students something like that. Eventually the student will take a lesson from me. We discover they're on a mouthpiece that's 2 or 3 sizes too big, the shape of the rim is wrong, and maybe the gap needs to be adjusted. All those things exist all because one teacher 5 or 10 years earlier told them to play on a 1.5 C. My question for you, if any of you out there are professors and teachers and professional musicians giving advice, is consider how and why you're giving that advice. If you don't know all this stuff, then give me a call. We hold seminars to teach everybody how this works, and we have special ones just for educators, whether or not you're giving advice through online lessons or at a university level, or maybe you're doing it in your home studio or wherever else that might happen. I don't care if you're endorsed by Yamaha or Bach or anyone else. Nobody has to know you came here and worked with me, and you can share all of this because it's going to help the entire community. But you're welcome to give us a call or send us an email and get signed up for one of these, and we can do a session with maybe 3 or 4 of your colleagues, whether you know them or not. We all come in the same place, and we really dive into this. We look at how we can solve these problems and help our students take it to the next level, and at the same time help you take it to the next level. And if you're not an educator or a person giving advice, you're on the other end of that, which means you need to consider who gave you that advice. The best players in the world can give you advice that results in the wrong mouthpiece because they may or may not have all the critical information necessary to understand what's going to work for you. And at the end of the day, I can't tell you what's going to work just by looking at you or looking at your teeth or anything else. To do it right, I have to either send you parts, have you try variations, give me feedback so I can then fine-tune that, and we work together, or you just come here in person, and within 30 to 60 minutes we find, that's why we offer a 30-day guarantee on our mouthpieces, because we know if you spend the time with us, we're going to spend the time with you, and we'll get it right. And over 90% of our clients say that their mouthpiece fit after getting a new 5mm is way better than what they had before, gives them more versatility, more options, but really fits them more comfortably, improves range, endurance, tone quality, accuracy, all those things. So this is where my heart is. This is my passion. This is what I love to do. So if you want to take your playing to the next level and choose a better mouthpiece, remember, choice could be that you never chose one at all. You just took the one that somebody gave you. Choose a new mouthpiece if you need to, but at least explore. Do you have the right rim? Do you have the right throat? Do you have the right backboard? Those are important. All right, I want to thank you for joining me. If you have questions or comments, please put them below. This is posted on my blog at whyharrelson.com, whyharrelson.com. So my blog, it says Jason's blog, you can see that there. It's also on YouTube. So if you're on YouTube, please press subscribe and follow us for our other videos. We do it, we have in-depth videos on the rim, the throat entrance, the backboard, gap, all kinds of other things. In a couple hours of watching videos, your mind could be opened up to things that could really take your playing to the next level. And it doesn't even matter if you buy anything from me or anything I make, this stuff will still help you. So I have a gazillion customers already. My goal isn't necessarily to get more customers, but to help my customers understand this so I don't repeat myself 1,000 times when I work with you individually. Hopefully when you walk in here, you've seen this video and we can get to this stuff faster. And I really appreciate you watching. Check out our other videos, and if you have any questions, just write in the comments below. Thanks.